They started having investors and shareholders, and large corporations started buying up local news places. It became about the bottom line and less so about serving the communities in which you were located.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Josh Moon is a liberal opinion columnist. He's an investigative reporter at the Alabama Political Reporter. He's been doing this in Alabama for a long time. So yeah, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you.
Yeah, man. And I'm kind of like an Alabama liberal, I guess, which is to say I would probably be a Republican in a northern state. But,
oh, man. Yeah, come on now. Come on.
Actually, that's probably fair. That's probably fair.
Maybe. That's not great, but.
No, I'm just joking, man. But honestly, I probably would be like put into a category. I drive a truck. I like NASCAR and fishing.
Well, that's something. That's something we can definitely relate to as lifelong Southerners who also happen to be leftist. We end up in a lot of spaces where they're not used to folks like us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
right.
In many ways stereotypical Southern white boys. We just so happen to have very left-wing politics and be militant unionists.
It's weird, man. I don't know. It's because it's very odd for me to be in this kind of company, because I'm usually not. And so, do y'all get also sucked into the conversations where people just assume that you are a right-wing, little bit racist person? I
tell you, I was. Yeah, definitely. The worst thing that happened to me most recently was I was at and I won't say the trade union just to provide some amount of cover, but I was at a trade union hall talking to him about how we've got a radio program on a black talk station in his area, in Muscle Shoals, and on the conservative station in Huntsville. And so and we've got some unions that sponsor the show. We got several unions sponsor the show, and I told them that we would appreciate the support, but if there's anything that any events that they have going on or anything that they want to highlight, we'd love to talk to them about it, whether or not they sponsor the show. And this guy was like, I don't really know that we want to advertise to that audience. I find that they're not a very good cultural fit. And I'm like, holy shit, man.
No, it's just, there was, we have, my wife will teach swimming lessons to young kids. And so, you run into a lot of folks that way. And she typically just does it with friends and things like that, and acquaintances. But she started to get more and more people, as this area has grown, because we live in Madison as well. And there are just a ton of people out there looking for, any kind of service, basically. And there was a lady the other day that said some things about the school system and how it's kind of being overrun by the wrong people, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And she was like, have you not even looked at us on Facebook?
Right.
Have you not seen what my husband does and what he says?
Look at for just one, look at how long my hair is. Come on, read the room a little bit, guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
I know, man.
So you've been doing the journalism thing in Alabama for a while. How long have you been writing in Alabama?
I started at the Montgomery Advertiser while I was still in college at Auburn Montgomery, when I want to say it was 1999. Was the first time I went over there and started taking high school football scores on Friday nights for them, getting paid $35 a night to sit in the office and and take down some scores and things. And it just kind of went from there. My first real gig with them was covering Alabama State University, historically black college in Montgomery, their athletic programs. I started covering them in 2001. And so, yeah, we just kind of went from there. Man, I got tossed into the fire there. That was they had a big scandal going, and that's kind of basically how I got started in doing investigative reporting stuff. Was I was tossed into this situation where I had to be basically an investigative reporter, even though I didn't really realize that's what I was doing. And so it just kind of snowballed from there. And I realized I really liked it. And then kind of got into writing columns. And then at a point, you realize there are things that are taking place outside of sports that, affect a lot of the people that you're covering in sports, because I covered, a lot of very, very poor Black athletes in this state and around the Southeast for a long time. And you hear their stories. And I'll tell you one thing that really got me was Katrina and how it affected a lot of the guys that I covered. I talked to some kids who, their families were just devastated in New Orleans. They were living in a college dorm while their families in the lower fifth ward, I believe, was the place that was most devastating. And I had two guys that lived there. And one of the guys that I covered and talked to pretty extensively, he had 3 or 4 family members killed, and were just gone they were just gone, and there was nothing to be done. And, and you see that sort of poverty and things. And, it just, so anyways, just kind of started writing different stuff. And somebody, there was a guy that was running our paper, Sam Martin, who worked at the Birmingham Times for a period here recently, but he was our publisher at the time. And he and Wanda Lloyd said, "Hey, you know what? Let's let this kid write a column." And people hated it and they loved it because everybody was talking about it. And so, it just kind of went from there.
Yeah. Well, was it kind of always I want to go into journalism, or did you just happen to kind of fall into the role writing about the sports, and then it just kind of kept going, or was that something you were always interested in?
Well, that was obviously the intent in college, but it was into college before I realized that's kind of what I wanted to do. All I knew for sure was I was not very good at manual labor. And that math could not be involved. So, once you eliminate those things, you kind of pare down what you could do. And honestly, the thing that got me kind of interested in journalism and especially what I do was Tony Kornheiser. He's a columnist out of DC, worked for the Washington Post, runs a very popular podcast now. Had a radio show with ESPN for years, but he wrote sports and a lifestyle column that was humorous and things. And it, kind of showed me that you can do these two things and you don't have to be pigeonholed into one thing. And that, this is an avenue that you could take if you were decent at writing, which, I guess, I don't know that I'm necessarily decent at writing. I'm decent at recognizing this is how I talk and I'm going to write how I talk. And so that's just all I've ever really done. And so, and that seemed to work out okay.
You've done some, I'm interested in how you've seen the industry change over the 20 years that you've been doing this, because just as long as I've been kind of politically active, there's just such a dearth of news, of coverage, of knowledge about what is going on, especially in our local governments.
Especially at the local level.
And that's one of the things that Adam knows you from. He was a UNISERV director for a while. He worked in the schools, and he really enjoyed your coverage of the Montgomery school takeover, as well as some corruption in the Limestone County schools. And I think that's how he got familiar with you. And so what has it been like doing that kind of work, and how has it changed? And because you're the only one reporting on some of these things.
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's been a combination, like with a lot of stuff, when you have an industry kind of collapse, the way journalism has collapsed, local news, I guess, has collapsed. There are often a lot of factors, and it's no different here. And, major player is greed at the corporate level, that, there were a lot of newspapers, man, I'll tell you how profitable newspapers were. Saudi oil men were investing in newspapers in the 70s because that's the level of profit that they were seeing returned on them. And they were tremendously profitable. And so, like all of those things, you start to get top heavy. And then, when they went public, and they started having investors and shareholders, and large corporations started buying up local news places. It became about the bottom line and less so about serving the communities in which you were located. And so you end up slashing this and slashing that to make the bottom line look better for your investors. In the meantime, when we were at the Montgomery Advertiser, which was controlled by Gannett, and I'll say, that Gannett gets a lot of bad press. They, to me, were one of the better corporate owners for a long period of time. But even saying that, we would be sitting there, and they would do the layoffs. They would lay off the guys making the least amount of money. In the meantime, we would have 18 suits come through, with a new initiative and things. And so, it just was so top heavy, and they were laying off people to continue to support the upper crust salaries at the corporations. And so you lost people when they started doing buyouts of all those old guys. I'll give you an example. Like right now at the Montgomery Advertiser, and I don't want to pick on them because there's some great people who work there. Brian Lyman is a good friend of mine, and Brian is the best in the state at covering courts and the legislature. He is phenomenal, and the knowledge that he has is second to none. But he's alone, and so they're essentially covering city government with a bunch of people who don't know anything, about it. And that's not a knock on them. They just don't know, And so when you eliminate these people that are coming, and you eliminate them so quickly without allowing them to at least pass on the knowledge of this or show some people around, you don't know that, the Montgomery school system has gone through this number of superintendents, or that they had a scandal about changing grades, which I busted them on in 2012 of changing these grades at these schools. You just don't. You lack that historical perspective, and it allows people to come in from the top and manipulate things. You saw that recently when they wanted to implant a new school board, because that was the whole problem with Montgomery schools. It couldn't be the racism that's been there for 50 or 60 years, but it was the school board. Well, I mean, there have been 30 different people on the school board in the time that the school systems have struggled, and so you lack that historical kind of perspective to pass along to people in the community, and it's a shame that that people don't do that, but you could see it coming from what happened in sports. You had all of these team websites in sports that popped up, Auburn Undercover, Rivals Auburn site, all of these different, Alabama had the same thing, and each team did this, and it's where fans of the team went to get positive coverage. We're going to do positive coverage, which means we're going to sell you a bunch of sunshiny bullshit about this team and never criticize anything that happens. And you're always going to be shocked when things don't work out, because, you didn't know that all this was happening. Right. Even though you had this other guy who you think, because they wrote something bad about Auburn, is a Bammer, or because they wrote something bad about, Alabama is a Barner, and you just, but what that guy's actually doing is his damn job. And so that's happened in all walks now,
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And there's going to these sites.
And there's just something to be said about like somebody having a beat and being on the beat for a long time and knowing the beat and knowing the history of the beat. Yeah. I mean, me being somebody, I'm a rank and file worker. I'm a member of my union, and I've been a member of my union for years now. But even just 4 years in the labor movement has given me significantly more understanding of how unions operate than almost anybody in Alabama media. And you see super remedial things that are just incorrect that would be remedied by a labor reporter being able to do this, saying the AFL-CIO is a union, like saying right to work means that they can fire you anytime, saying that the Teamsters are called that because they're coming together as a team. These are things that I've seen local reporters say, and it's not necessarily that those are super indicting of their coverage, but it's like they literally don't know anything about people. You've got AL.com, they've got a business reporter reporting on, the UMWA strike and the Amazon stuff in Bessemer. And it's like, these people, they don't know anything. They don't, and there's just, and you could say that about anything. Like, I don't know what's going on in even Huntsville City schools. That's something that Adam would have a really good bit of expertise. The Huntsville City Council, I don't know a whole lot about what's going on there. The State House is something that I'm, but the newspapers have been so cut down that there's just not the people to do these beats.
Oh yeah, listen, I'll give you. If people need a good example, when I arrived at the Montgomery Advertiser, there were 3 people, all of them over 40 years old, and all of them with 20 plus years of experience covering the Alabama legislature alone. There were 4 other people covering the local city government there. So that's 7 people. There are now 7 people total in the newsroom. So wow. That's what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? And I'm talking about on the news side. I'm sure there's some other guys in sports and things like that. But on the news side, they're they're covering everything. They're covering the cops, the courts, the whole deal. If anybody wants to understand it better, David Simon, who the creator of The Wire and a former Baltimore reporter, he testified before Congress, and this was probably 15 years ago. And this was about the decline of newspapers and what could be done. And he talked about what the dangers were of losing these guys that were on, say, the cops beat. It's like, I go to cop bars and I hang out with cops. I talk to police officers.
Yeah, we apologize for that. That does not sound.
No, I'm just
saying,
but no, it's he said I go and I talk to these people
because you have to have relationships.
Right.
Yeah, and like with everything, there are very, very good cops, very good people that want to do a fantastic job on that. They understand what the job is. There are others who are misguided and don't understand what they should be doing. There are others that are ego driven and things. And so when that eliminated a lot of these press releases that people just buy at face value, when the cops put them out and tell you what's happened somewhere, and then you find out, in a lawsuit a year later, shit, that's not what happened in this thing at all. They completely lied about this. And so that's what you've lost, is that person that's there giving you a fair perspective on what's taking place and understanding what's happening there. And you don't have that anymore. And it's not just in cops. It's in cops, it's in courts, it's in the legislature, it's in your city government, it's in schools, it's everywhere out there. You've lost that. And you're right. The lack of information that gets to people now is devastating to a lot of communities. And, it's really hurtful, and I hate to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Jacob, I was just going to give one more example on kind of how I saw it play out as a labor organizer on my side of things. When I first started in Huntsville as a representative of Huntsville City Schools employees, of course, I wanted to get to know the reporters in the area. And I got to know a reporter at the Huntsville Times. We did a sit-down interview within my first month on the job, and he was terminated within a month or two. A massive round of layoffs at the Huntsville Times. They consolidated. I think that's when they went to the 3 days a week actually printing it. And then, I'm starting from scratch. I'm having to find, who is reporting it? Oh, we don't have an education reporter anymore. Or we don't really have a Huntsville City politics reporter anymore. And so then I'm working with local TV news crews. Well, and these are young people typically who are rotating in. They might do 1, maybe 2 years tops at a station before they're off to Nashville or Kansas City or wherever they're going. And I'm having to explain what a school superintendent is versus a school board. And that, no, actually, I don't work for Huntsville City Schools. I work for the Alabama Education Association, who represents employees in Huntsville. And so, like you said, Jacob, in like very elementary remedial kind of things. And
having to explain it every few months.
Right. And it wasn't to insult their intelligence. They're, fine people, but they're not experts at any of this. And in most cases, in my experience, they would call me up about 2 hours before they needed to have something turned in. And were frantically searching for someone willing to go on camera so that they could get about 25 seconds from me that they could stick into a 90-second story within the next 2 hours. And that's not the same as having long-standing relationships are, as you mentioned, Josh, having that history, the institutional knowledge of, hey, this new school board president, they're saying the same shit the old one said 10 years ago. Yeah. We've been there, done that.
That's crazy, man. And you know, and this is, I want to say too, I don't knock any reporter because they're in a horrible position on this. You know, they're covering 4 different beats. They're getting calls all the time from people who are overworking the hell out of them and underpaying them. You know, you get paid more for being a manager at McDonald's than you do for most of these entry-level jobs into journalism now. And it's, you know, and I'll say, just to say, Ashley Rimkus, Paul Gaddis, you know, there are a number, Anna Claire at AL.com. Yeah. They do a really good job in trying to cover all of these things, you know, and if you look at what they're trying to cover, man, I feel so bad about, you know, kind of shitting the coverage of what they're doing because they're doing, they're running their damn legs off trying to do this stuff, and they're only human. You know, and so they're doing the best they can. It's just that what the situation that's been created is so unmanageable now, and it's really a shame that we haven't figured out a good way to kind of give people, because people will read these things. People are interested in what's going on in these different areas of stuff. And it's a shame we haven't figured out a delivery system that works and it can be monetized to the point where we can actually pay some of these people to do, you know, these jobs that we need.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.